Hey guys, tonight we wander down a forgotten path lit by flickering flames and eerie shadows, where the goddess Hecate waits with her torches, her dogs, and 1,000 slightly suspicious jars. You step lightly, but the ground crunches with dry leaves and something that definitely used to be alive. The mist curls around your ankles. Somewhere, an owl hoots, but it sounds like it's laughing. Yes, this is one of those Greek myths where you definitely don't make it out alive. But don't worry, you're not here to survive. You're here to get sleepy. Very, very sleepy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where, and when, people are tuning in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge slowly down an overgrown road that seems unsure whether it still wants to exist. The branches overhead lean just a bit too far inward, and even the moonlight feels reluctant to help. Somewhere at the junction of 3 forgotten paths, a woman stands alone, holding a flaming torch in each hand like she's about to do something theatrical or unsettling, or both. She is Hecate, goddess of witchcraft, crossroads, ghosts, and, depending on who you ask, spontaneous canine summoning. She's draped in midnight black robes, and her expression is the kind that makes squirrels drop their acorns and quietly back away. You pause, expecting her to say something epic or cryptic. Instead, she squints at the flame like it's not behaving. Too yellow, she mutters, poking the torch with the business end of a bone-handled wand. This should be more moonlit silver. Less, Olympus wedding reception. You blink. Is she critiquing her own torchlight? Yes, she is. Here's a curious thing. While many gods spent their time throwing lightning bolts or seducing mortals in increasingly illegal animal forms, Hecate spent hers, tinkering, adjusting rituals, repainting magical symbols in slightly more symmetrical patterns. And, as you're about to learn, she may have been the first to care deeply about lighting ambience. Historians still argue whether Hecate originated as a foreign goddess absorbed into the Greek pantheon, or if she was always lurking there, in the shadows just off stage. What's clearer is that she held dominion over thresholds, transitions, and torch-bearing, a kind of divine night shift manager for all things spooky. You sit at the edge of the crossroad, resting on a moss-covered rock shaped eerily like a thigh bone. Hecate continues fiddling with the torch, occasionally shaking it like a remote that won't change channels. From the fog, 2 enormous dogs emerge. One is lean and spectral, with empty eye sockets and a tail made of smoke. The other is just a regular dog, like a cheerful mutt with one ear permanently flopped sideways. He trots up to you, wagging, then sneezes dramatically and lies down on your foot. This one's Sir B, Hecate says, not looking up. The ghost dog doesn't have a name. He refuses. Artists keep painting 3-headed ones. But honestly, that's just bad PR. You nod solemnly. You've learned not to question ancient deities about branding inconsistencies. Now, here's a mainstream fact. Torchlight wasn't just a dramatic prop in mythology. Ancient Greeks used simple oil lamps and torches made from pitch-soaked wood or resinous bark. These weren't reliable sources of clean light, though they smoked, flickered, and sputtered, which, come to think of it, made them perfect for Hecate's aesthetic. You notice the torches here aren't quite normal. The flame hums slightly. It throws shadows in directions you didn't expect, like backward or straight down. Hecate leans in, eyes narrowed. This one's better, she murmurs, glimmers like it knows secrets. Still needs a touch of lavender. From a pouch, she pulls what looks like dried herbs, mutters a phrase in ancient something, and tosses them into the flame. Instantly, the torch whooshes into a cool violet glow. The shadows sharpen. The vibe? Immaculate. That's when she finally looks at you. You're here for the ambience, aren't you? She asks. You start to deny it, but she waves her hand. Doesn't matter. Sit still. Let me show you the crossfade effect. She pulls out another torch, one that gives off an indigo blue flame. Slowly, deliberately, she walks between them, adjusting angles, lifting one higher, lowering another. It's a lighting test. Like what theater techs do with gels before opening night. You half expect her to call for fog machines. It's hypnotic, though. The flickering shadows stretch and merge. You're not sure, but the moss at your feet seems to exhale. The air smells like sage and ozone. Lighting sets mood, she says, eyes flickering with reflection. Mood directs energy. Energy shapes intent. Intent defines magic. You nod as if that made sense and wasn't just a mood board quote from a candle brand. The spectral dog yawns. Sir B snorts and chases a beetle. Hecate crouches again, adjusting a third torch now. This one with a pulsing green ember at its heart. You realize she's layering light, not for brightness, but feeling. A squirrel skitters down from a tree, sees the green torch, and immediately faints. She muses. Too much essence of underworld. Note for later. And so the goddess of witches, ghosts, and transitions perfects her torch game under the stars. Not for vanity, not for Instagram, but because shadows deserve nuance. And crossroads deserve mood. You lie back against a tree, watching the lights shimmer across the fog. Somewhere, faint and far away, a lyre strums. Or maybe that's your heartbeat. Slowing. The path glows gently, not to guide you forward, but to wrap you softly in the idea that night isn't scary. It's just waiting for the right kind of light. You wake to the sound of a clay pot wobbling unsteadily on stone, then falling over with a gentle glorp. Hecate is kneeling nearby, poking through a chaotic collection of magical oddments scattered across the cave floor like someone just tipped over the world's weirdest junk drawer. Welcome to her cave, not the screaming, bone-strewn horror you'd expect, but more like a cozy hoarder's den for the magically inclined. The walls are covered with faded frescoes and soot marks from torch testing gone wrong. There's a cot in the corner, three-legged stools everywhere, and shelves sagging under jars labeled things like Salt of Saturn and Newt-ish, probably. The main attraction tonight, however, is her illumination bench, a slab of dark stone she uses exclusively for crafting new light sources. It's where magical trial and error goes to get both brighter and weirder. Tonight, she's focused on a gourd. Not just any gourd, though. This one has been hollowed out, dried, enchanted, partially enchanted again because she messed up the first incantation, and finally lined with silver dust. It glows, a soft, buttery gold from inside. Not much, just enough to make everything in the cave look like it's been smeared with warm honey. See, she says proudly, you won't find that in Apollo's toolbox. She sets the glowing gourd beside a jar labeled moon residue, unconfirmed, and moves on to a pair of crystal rods bound together with iron wire. You can't tell if it's a lighting device or some kind of magical salad tongs. She zaps it briefly with a spell that smells like burnt rosemary. But nothing happens, except your toes feel briefly optimistic for no reason. That's Hecate's style. She collects the odd, the broken, the probably cursed, and the definitely not from this plane. Most of these items don't have names, because naming them makes them act up. One jar growled at her last week when she labeled it, definitely not alive. There's a lute in the corner with a string missing. Apparently, it belonged to Orpheus once. It now plays only minor chords and refuses to participate in sing-alongs. Hecate keeps it around for when dramatic tension is needed in spellcasting. She swears it enhances atmosphere. You notice a curious pattern. Most of the items she experiments with either glow or reflect light in odd ways. Mirrors made of black glass. A bowl filled with water that pulses faintly whenever someone lies within earshot. A feather that emits a pale glow only when someone near it is anxious. Which, let's be honest, is pretty much always in this cave. One item in particular catches your eye. A lantern fashioned from a hollowed-out animal skull, lined with bronze and filled with some kind of gel that moves slightly on its own. When lit, it emits a shimmer like moonlight reflected off wet marble. You point at it. Hecate grins. That's the prototype. The mood skull. It's reactive. Try thinking about something sad. You frown. Your mind wanders to that one time a pigeon flew into your sandwich. Instantly, the lantern shifts hue to a soft, melancholy blue. You nailed it, Hecate says, delighted. Now think about olives. You do. The light warms to a pleasant golden amber. Somewhere, the lute plays a smug D minor. Historians still debate whether Hecate's association with torches was symbolic or literal. Was she truly a goddess of firelight and shadows? Or did she simply own the vibe so well that later poets went with it? You begin to understand why they were confused. Even you can't tell whether she's doing witchcraft or interior decorating. She moves to a shallow stone bowl filled with ashes and herbs. Leans down, and mutters a chant. Instantly, a small flame appears, not wild or aggressive, but calm, intentional. The flame casts no heat, but it does cast impressions. Shadows on the wall that look like birds in flight. Or dancers, or a slow motion sneeze. Not bad, she murmurs, but it still smells like goat. You suppress a cough. She's right. And then, you hear a squelch. A pot has tipped over again. This time, it's the one filled with what looks like fermented eel jelly. The spill glows faintly pink, and slowly starts oozing toward the loot. Sir B, Hecate says without looking, stop licking that, I'm serious. The dog whines. The skull lantern pulses in disapproval. You scoot slightly farther from both. She's trying to explain something now. You catch the words, light frequency, and emotional resonance, and slightly possessed snail shell. But honestly, you're mostly just captivated by how calm she is. Like a woman who's made peace with her lifestyle choices, her ghost roommates, and the fact that her mood lighting might one day achieve sentience. Here's a quirky fact. Ancient Greeks believed that certain herbs, like bay leaf or hellebore, could influence not just the mind, but the light of the soul. They didn't distinguish much between internal glow and external. Maybe Hecate didn't either. She gestures to a crystal that splits torchlight into overlapping arcs across the cave ceiling, one green, one purple, one a color your brain refuses to name. This is what the underworld feels like when no one's yelling. She says. You lie back on a fur-covered rock. Gaze at the lights above, and feel the cave hum softly with unspoken spells and slightly damp optimism. The warmth of the glowing gourd seeps into your bones. Sir B snores. Somewhere, in a jar. Something mutters, finally, and goes silent. The cave fades into a cradle of shadows. And Hecate keeps rearranging the light. You wake to the scent of figs roasting over low coals and the unmistakable clink of someone plating a meal for someone who doesn't eat anymore. Hecate is hosting dinner again, and as usual, the guest list is more underworld than upper crust. She's laid out 3 places. One for herself, one for you, and one for, well, you're not entirely sure. The third spot at the stone table is occupied by a vague shimmer in the air and a chill that doesn't seem to come from anywhere in particular. You glance toward it, and your eyes involuntarily slide sideways. It's not hostile, just inconveniently spectral. Don't worry. Hecate says casually. That's just Doros. He died tragically trying to invent underwater archery. Still thinks it should have worked. Doros huffs. Or something huff adjacent. You nod politely toward the shimmer and sit down. On your plate, olives, barley cakes, dried squid jerky. Why? And one small honeyed fig that seems slightly more sentient than the rest. Hecate gestures at a smoky lantern above the table. Mood's all wrong. Hang on. She dims it slightly, adjusts a reflective shard at the base. And now the table glows like it's lit by nostalgia and sad poetry. You feel like you're in an amphora painting about missed chances. Dinner with the dead is surprisingly quiet. No utensils scraping, no slurping, no small talk, just the sound of wind outside and the soft crunch of ghostly figs being politely ignored. This kind of meal is Hecate's specialty. Ancient Greeks, especially in rural areas, believed that offerings left at crossroads and doorways could feed wandering spirits. It wasn't about calories, it was about memory. Honoring the dead, keeping their stories simmering on the back burner of time. Most of them don't even remember what food tastes like. She explains, pouring wine into an obsidian goblet that hisses faintly. But the light? That they notice, that they feel. You glance around. The cave's usual torch setup has been replaced tonight by a ring of amber glowing stones that pulse gently like a heartbeat. They don't cast shadows. Exactly, they sculpt them. Faces seem fuller, eyes deeper. Even Doros looks more resolved. There's a scholarly debate, still ongoing, of course, about whether underworld rituals in Hecate's name were literal meals for ghosts or symbolic offerings. Some historians argue these rites were performative. Others think they were functional, creating liminal spaces where the living and the dead could overlap for just long enough to exchange something. A memory, a warning, a recipe. You nibble the squid jerky, which is somehow both too salty and not salty enough. Sir B eyes it mournfully. You slip him a piece. He burps phosphorescent mist. Hecate smirks. Careful. That's how he took down a Spartan once. You raise an eyebrow. Long story. Involved a torch relay, a haunted helmet, and 3 jars of spoiled feta. Doros chuckles. Or the lantern flickers. Same effect. The meal continues in this dreamy, slow rhythm. The lights shift subtly every few minutes, sometimes gold, sometimes a mellow indigo, sometimes a soft green that makes your fingernails feel nostalgic. Each hue brings with it a new memory, a different tone to the silence. You're not sure if you're eating or participating in a séance. Possibly both. Hecate leans back, resting her chin on her fist. You know, once I tried putting up one of those eternal flame things. Big altar, sacred fire, lots of gold leaf. Do you know what happened? You shake your head. Cats kept knocking over the oil jars. I gave up. There's something deeply mundane about the goddess of witchcraft venting about incooperative wildlife. And yet, it makes her more real. Less myth, more person who has lost her patience with ceramic bowls. She changes the subject, tells you about a recent dream in which she tried to light a corridor in the underworld using only fireflies and mirrors. It worked for about 4 minutes before the fireflies unionized and demanded fruit. Which I respect, she says, but I was in the middle of an invocation. You stifle a laugh and sip your wine. The goblet's warmth spreads through you in a way that feels less like alcohol and more like permission to relax. To release. Sir B begins chasing his tail. Then forgets what he was doing and collapses happily. And you? You sit back and watch the candlelight wrap around old grief like a scarf. Hecate lights a final torch, a deep violet one, and sets it behind Doros. For a moment, the shimmer becomes almost solid. You see the trace of a beard, a dented bronze helmet, eyes that look surprised to be seen again. Thanks, he says quietly. Then he's gone. The torch sputters, then steadies. Hecate doesn't speak, neither do you. The silence feels full, like the pause after a story's final sentence but before the last page is turned. She clears the table with a snap of her fingers. The leftovers vanish. The wine jug refills itself out of sheer habit. You're left with one fig, glowing faintly, sitting at the center of the table. You're not sure if it's meant to be eaten or just remembered. You leave it. It starts with Hera, which is usually how trouble starts. You and Hecate are lounging beside a low stone brazier, watching a lazy spiral of smoke rise through a crack in the cave ceiling. The mood is mellow. The lighting soft, shadows flicker like half-forgotten lullabies across the walls. Sir B is drooling in his sleep. Even the skull lantern has settled into a peaceful lavender hum. Then, clack, 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 the unmistakable sound of goddess heels on stone. Hecate, comes the voice, syrupy and sharp as lemon rind. Darling, this place is so atmospheric. You both flinch. Hera strides in wearing something absurdly impractical for a cave, gilded sandals. A silver peplos that somehow never wrinkles. And enough perfume to reclassify the air as floral territory. She looks around with narrowed eyes, like she's scanning for poorly arranged furniture or emotional vulnerability. Your lighting, she says, with a smile so tight it could slice cheese, is very bold. Hecate blinks. Thank you? Oh, I mean, if you like the whole witch in the woods, raising the dead aesthetic. It's so you. You can almost hear a harp string snap in the background. See, Hera is the queen of Olympus, goddess of marriage, power, peacocks, and passive aggression. And while she doesn't say the word tacky, her expression screams it. This moment, this visit, is what sparks something in Hecate. A slow burning, torch-lit determination. Because the queen of the gods just criticized her vibe. And if there's one thing Hecate takes personally, it's vibe. She doesn't reply, just nods once and takes a long, thoughtful look at the nearest torch. You see the gears turning behind her eyes. Hera keeps prattling on about the clean lines of Olympus lighting. How Zeus recently installed an obsidian chandelier that reeks of overcompensation. And how the color gold is so back this season. You want to ask who made Hera the god of interior design. But you also want to live. Hecate leads her guest on a short tour of the cave. Hera's eyes linger disapprovingly on the glowing gourd and mood skull. She sniffs at the violet torchlight, raises an eyebrow at the ash bowl that projects dancing shadows, and finally makes a vague, Noise that could mean anything from fascinating to you should be jailed for this. Anyway, Hera says as she prepares to leave, adjusting her already perfect hair, if you ever want to consult someone about your presentation, let me know. I have a nymph who does lighting. Then she vanishes in a shimmer of polished contempt. The cave is silent. Sir B lifts his head, sensing tension. Hecate's jaw tightens. She picks up a handful of herbs and tosses them at a torch. It flares briefly, then dims. Well, she says, apparently we're unfashionable. You want to tell her it's not true. That her lighting is unique. That haunted fire with mild emotional consequences is in. But you don't get the chance. Because she's already moving, rearranging things, taking inventory, making a new list in her head. You can practically hear the headings: torch temperature, shadow control, dramatic diffusion. Historians still argue whether Hera and Hecate had any real conflict or whether this entire dynamic is just a late mythological invention by poets who needed to spice things up with some divine girl drama. But honestly, sitting here now, watching Hecate hold up a bronze reflector plate and mutter, "Too reflective. Not enough menace," you can confirm the feud is real. Here's a mainstream fact: Greek homes used open flame for everything from cooking to ceremony. But temples? Temples cared deeply about how light behaved. Shadows weren't just functional, they were symbolic. They indicated presence, absence, divine favor. Hecate's obsession isn't frivolous. It's religious geometry. She starts scribbling in a wax tablet. You sneak a peek. Torch angle: 32 degrees. Flame color: acceptable but sulky. Mood skull: moody enough? Asks Sir B. There's a moment when she looks at the gourd again. Then back at the lantern. Then, slowly, at you. Let's make ambience the envy of Olympus. She says softly. It's not a declaration of war. It's worse. It's a design challenge. You nod solemnly. You're in. That night, she builds 3 experimental torches. One burns without fire. One casts light but no shadow. One creates the illusion of distant thunderclouds when placed in corners. You're asked to stand in various places and look like a confused mortal. You try your best. She fiddles with angles, measures flicker rates. Even the ghost dog gets involved, occasionally sitting where shadows fall weirdest. Sir B mostly contributes by sneezing on things and offering moral support. The lighting is already beautiful. But Hecate isn't chasing beauty. She's chasing command. Command of space. Command of tone. She wants her lighting to whisper and echo and breathe. To say what words shouldn't. Later, long past midnight, you sit back as she adjusts a torch one final time. The cave glows in layers: warm, cool, sacred, strange. For the first time, it feels like the cave is responding. Like the air itself has agreed to play along. Hecate looks satisfied. And somewhere, in the deepest part of the cave, the skull lantern lets out a tiny, approving sigh. You awaken to the sound of bubbles. Not the joyful pop of bathwater, but the ominous blorp of something thick and arcane being stirred with a stick, possibly cursed. Definitely on fire. Hecate is standing over a cauldron the size of a cartwheel, muttering a spell that sounds like someone reading backwards from a wine menu. Around her, several objects hover in midair: a cracked mirror, a taxidermied bat with sunglasses, and a fist-sized hunk of something she insists is mostly organic. We're testing mood sources, she announces as you sit up. Swamp gas didn't work. Made everyone smell like boiled frogs. Next attempt, sunstone. She gestures to a shimmering crystal mounted on a tripod. The beam of light it casts is strange, yellow-orange like late afternoon. But with an undertone of something much older. It doesn't flicker. It pulses. Like a heartbeat. Or an opinion. You squint at it. It's beautiful. And deeply upsetting. That's promising, she says cheerfully. And thus begins the trials. You're handed a clipboard, which feels suspiciously bureaucratic for a cave full of ghosts and glowing herbs. Your job? Observe each lighting method and record its emotional effect. Shadow shape, and whether or not it caused you to hear your childhood nickname whispered by a plant. The first test, enchanted olive oil. The flame burns cleanly, with a golden glow and a faint scent of brunch. For a moment, you feel optimistic. Like maybe your old plans will work out. Then the flame hiccups and emits a soft tisk. Your self-esteem withers slightly. Too judgmental, Hecate says. jotting it down. Next up, phosphorescent fungus. Harvested from a haunted wine cellar near Thessaly. It glows a pleasant mint green, like the inside of a dream where you're always 2 minutes late for something important. The shadows it casts are soft but somehow inquisitive. You catch one trying to peek at your notes. Interesting, Hecate muses. A bit nosy. Then there's the haunted candle. No further explanation is given. When lit, it emits a cool, silver light that smells like regret and unfinished letters. The flame sways even when there's no breeze. At one point, it seems to look directly at you. You write down, "Don't trust it," and move on. Historians still argue whether Hecate was responsible for the spread of torch rituals across rural Attica, or if she simply inspired them by accident. Some say she designed her own magical flame that could purify a room just by flickering in the right way. Others argue that's just what happens when you light pine sap and whisper gossip into the smoke. Then comes the most chaotic entry in the trial series, a reflective bowl of water lit from beneath by glowing embers. It projects ripples onto the cave ceiling, beautiful, dreamlike waves that seem to move in sync with your heartbeat. For a moment, you forget where you are. You feel suspended, weightless, intended, and then the bowl speaks. Just one word, your name. You fall off the stool. Hecate sighs. Note to self: don't mix whisper coal with memory water. Sir B trots over and licks your face. You're fine, just startled. And also, you might cry a little later when you think about your 8th birthday for no reason. You recover just in time for the next experiment, floating light orbs. These tiny spheres, no larger than grapes, emit a soft glow and drift lazily through the air like sleepy fireflies. Hecate releases a cluster of them, and they scatter like bubbles in a hot spring. One lands on your head. You feel slightly more forgiving. Great for reconciliation rituals, she says, nodding. You're not sure how she made them. And honestly, it's better that way. The strangest test of all, however, comes from a simple clay dish filled with salt and crushed garnet. When set ablaze, it produces no flame, but suddenly, every object in the room casts a shadow facing toward the light. The walls seem to lean in. Curious. Even Sir B looks briefly philosophical. I call it the contraflame, Hecate says with a little smile. You stare, half convinced reality just hiccuped. You could swear the shadows are whispering about you. You put the clipboard down and walk outside for a moment. Under the stars, you breathe deep. The night feels colder now, like it knows things it won't say aloud. You look back into the cave and see the flickering of 5 different kinds of light playing off Hecate's silhouette as she arranges them like a sculptor with color and flame. Here's a fringe tidbit. In some fragments of lost Greek poetry, there are hints that certain lights were said to change fate. That if a flame was lit at the right hour, with the right herb, under the right moon, it could make a path safer, or a choice wiser. Of course, that could just be poetic nonsense. But watching Hecate work, you believe it. She doesn't chase brightness, she chases meaning. A flicker that says this is sorrow. A hue that murmurs you're safe here. A glow that nudges you towards sleep. Or memory. Or something older than either. At the end of the trials, the cave is littered with spent herbs, ash smears, and one disgruntled owl who wandered in and refused to leave. Hecate surveys the mess, brushes her hands together, and looks at you. We're close, she says. One more experiment. You brace yourself. She hands you a small amulet. Inside, a tiny flicker of light swirls endlessly in slow circles. It's warm in your palm. It smells like thyme and the sea. You don't ask what it does. You just hold it, and you feel calm. You're dozing on a pile of surprisingly clean pelts when the skull lantern flares to life with a hiss like a tired librarian. The cave dims around it. Not because other lights go out, but because this one demands attention. The flame inside twirls lazily, casting distorted silhouettes across the wall. And that's when the shadows begin to move. Not in the usual way. Not as a simple echo of your body or the flicker of fire. These shadows dance, shift, grow. Hecate walks in holding a second lantern, one made from a polished conch shell and mounted on a thin gold frame. She sets it beside the skull. And suddenly the wall behind you becomes a theater stage. Shapes form. A woman standing at a crossroads. A pair of torches. A dog. Then the woman moves. It's not real. Obviously. It's some kind of magical light play, what we In the future, would probably call an ancient version of shadow puppetry, but there's no puppets. No screens, just light, surfaces, and some unspeakably complicated enchantment. Hecate watches silently. I didn't mean to do that, she finally says. It started when I added dried mint to the flame. Now the shadows have opinions. You nod, wide-eyed, as a new scene unfolds. A man running through a forest, chased by wolves. Then the image shifts again. Two women standing under a moon, holding hands. A bird flying upward, caught in a web of light. These are memories, she whispers. Not mine, not yours, just remembered. You look around the cave, suddenly aware that the walls have been watching all along. That each flicker of light has been silently painting stories on the stone. The way wind leaves lines in sand. Historians still debate whether early Greek rituals incorporated visual storytelling alongside chanting and incense. Some believe Hecate's caves may have functioned like mystical amphitheaters, places where light told what words couldn't. You watch the moving shadows again. Transfixed. They're beautiful. They're haunting. They're oddly funny. One moment, the wall shows a noble warrior confronting a sea serpent. Dramatic music plays in your imagination. Then the serpent accidentally sneezes itself inside out, and the warrior faints. You're not sure if it's meant to be a tragedy or a farce. Hecate raises one eyebrow. Sometimes the shadows get cheeky. I think one of the torches is possessed. Sir B barks once, in agreement, then buries his nose under his paw. The lantern show continues. One scene shows the moment you entered the cave. Exaggerated with flair. Your cloak longer. Your eyes wider. The lighting more heroic. Another shows Hecate herself, stirring a cauldron, then dramatically flipping her hair in slow motion while Sir B does a synchronized spin behind her. Okay, she mutters. That one's definitely editorializing. You laugh, softly, so as not to offend the flame. It's odd, isn't it? The goddess of witchcraft inventing what is essentially ancient projection mapping. She adjusts the lanterns again. The skull glows a little brighter. The conch dims to a faint blush. The shadows shift. This time, it's not a scene, it's a mood. The wall becomes a painting of dusk. Soft and blue and nearly still. A shepherd walking home. A child chasing a flickering light. Nothing dramatic happens, but it feels real, like something you once almost dreamed. And here's a quirky fact. In certain Hellenistic cults, nighttime rites involved illumination meditations, where followers would stare at a flame in complete silence, waiting for the divine to whisper through flicker and form. It wasn't about seeing something new. It was about remembering something old. Hecate doesn't explain the spell. Doesn't need to. You just sit there, watching the walls remember. Eventually, she dims the lanterns. One by one, the skull goes last, its final flicker forming a vague smile before vanishing into smoke. You breathe out slowly. You hadn't realized you were holding your breath. Hecate stretches like a cat, joints popping quietly. Light wants to tell stories, she says. The trick is not getting in the way. She shows you the components of the lanterns. Some are mundane, glass, bone, silver wire. Others are less so. Dew collected on the last day of spring. A fragment of lullaby hummed by a river spirit. Something that looks like a pearl but blinks once when you stare too long. She lets you hold the conch lantern. It's warm, but not hot. It smells faintly of salt and lilacs. When you tip it slightly, it emits a low note, almost musical. It harmonizes with shadow. Hecate says, if I could get 3 of these in sync, I think I could stage an entire play. You glance around. The cave is full of unused wall space. You sense a full-scale mythological musical brewing. Then, as if on cue, the ghost dog lifts his head and hums a single, solemn note. The conch hums back. You both freeze. Hecate's eyes widen. Okay, she says. That's new. A shadow flickers on the far wall. A mountain. A door. A flickering torch. Then nothing. The moment passes. Hecate snaps her fingers. A fire springs to life. The ordinary kind. Warm. Gentle. Mundane. She looks at you. Shadow theater's done for tonight, she says. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. You lie back down, your head full of pictures you didn't know you'd seen. Images that feel like they belong to someone else but fit perfectly into your dreams. Somewhere behind your eyes, the shadows are still dancing. Morning, or whatever counts as morning in a cave with custom lighting, Comes with the scent of pine and a distant sound like deer hooves gently refusing to be quiet. Hecate's already up, crouched at the cave's entrance, whispering to her torches like they're sensitive stage actors. The lighting today is peach-hued with undertones of, "Don't annoy me before I've had root tea." Then she looks up and sighs. She's back. You follow her gaze and, sure enough, Artemis has arrived, goddess of the hunt, protector of young maidens, and uninvited sleepover guest since at least 600 BCE. She strides into the clearing wearing a tunic that somehow never collects dust. A bow slung across her back, and the expression of someone who just dared a mountain to move, and it did. "Is this a bad time?" Artemis asks, already removing her quiver and tossing it onto a mossy log like a regular visitor who's claimed her usual spot. "Yes," Hecate says flatly. Artemis grins. "Great." Sir B yelps with joy and bounds over. Ghost dog floats in silently, possibly judging. "Your deer," Hecate says, gesturing behind Artemis, "are freaking out. Again." You glance past the goddess of the hunt and see them, 6 delicate white deer. Each glowing faintly, tethered to a branch with a rope made of starlight and sarcasm. They are not enjoying Hecate's current lighting setup. They don't like mauve, Artemis admits, or shadows that look like wolves. Or torches that hum. Which ones don't hum? Hecate shoots back. Historians still argue whether Artemis and Hecate were sisters, rivals, or simply two gods with overlapping night shift schedules. What's clear is they share certain traits: independence, intensity, and absolutely no patience for anyone telling them to calm down. Artemis begins poking through Hecate's lighting setup like a kid in a hardware store. "What's this one do?" "Don't touch." Too late. A torch flares up in a pulse of shimmering chartreuse and plays the sound of distant wolves howling in reverse. One of the deer faints. "Oops." Hecate pinches the bridge of her nose. "Why are you here, Artemis?" Artemis plops down cross-legged. "There's a festival near Eleusis. Some minor priest lit a fire wrong. 3 trees caught on sacred fire. Long story short. Need a place to crash. Yours is haunted and defensible." "Perfect. Defensible from what?" Hecate asks. Artemis shrugs. "Mostly complaints. You've never seen Hecate look this close to casting a friendship banishment spell. But she lets it slide. Eventually, you're asked to help reconfigure the lighting so the deer will stop trembling like they've just seen a bear with a spreadsheet." Hecate dims the violet torch, swaps the conch lamp for a simple reed candle, and uses reflective stones to soften the shadows. The result is cozy forest twilight. The deer immediately calm down. Artemis grins. "See? Mood lighting. Told you I liked your weird cave aesthetic." "Liar," Hecate mutters, but you see the corner of her mouth twitch. There's a mainstream historical note here. Artemis was often invoked in liminal spaces. Just like Hecate, crossroads, thresholds, new moons, all sacred to both. In some rare cults, they even shared temples, maybe not willingly, but still. Artemis pulls out a pouch of dried berries and tosses you one. It tastes like sunlight and anxiety. Then she gets up and begins pacing. "So, I've been thinking, this is always dangerous. What if," she says, "we invent a new kind of ritual? One that moves. A path of torches. A procession. You light them one by one. Walk through. Each one gives you a vibe." Hecate raises an eyebrow. "You mean, like a parade?" Artemis nods, clearly pleased. "Exactly. But moodier." Hecate considers. "If we do this, we're not calling it the emotional torch walk. Fine, we call it the moonlit passage. Or the illumined hunt. 2 on brand." They bicker. You pretend not to listen. But you're already imagining it. Torchlight guiding you down a path. Each flame calibrated to a feeling. Release. Hope. Nostalgia. Forgiveness. Maybe one that smells like your grandmother's garden. You realize, suddenly, that this might be how rituals actually start. Not from laws or decrees, but from 2 powerful women casually arguing under a hill about whose vibe is superior. Eventually, Hecate relents. She agrees to test the idea. You help set it up. 6 torches, each spaced along the outer edge of the cave clearing. Each with different flame. Pink-orange like dawn, cool silver-blue like river mist, deep crimson like slow anger. As you walk past each one, you feel different, not magically compelled, just nudged. By the final torch, you feel lighter, clearer, Like someone removed a thought from the back of your mind that didn't need to be there anymore. Even Artemis is impressed. She claps Hecate on the back. Told you you're the queen of fire feelings. I'm the queen of witchcraft. Hecate says dryly. Same thing, Artemis replies. They share a look. Complicated. Familiar. The kind you only share with someone who once helped you hex an arrogant river god because he insulted your sandals. Night falls again. The deer are sleeping peacefully. The ghost dog floats in slow circles. Hecate lights one last torch, a quiet orange one with a green core, and places it near her pillow. You follow suit. Choose a soft blue flame in a hanging jar. As you close your eyes, you feel its light press gently against your thoughts. Not loud, not bright, just present. And in the quiet that follows, you realize something. Maybe mood lighting is witchcraft. There's a distinct smell in the cave today, burnt lavender, scorched thyme, and the unmistakable stench of magic gone sideways. You stumble out of your sleeping spot to find Hecate mid-ritual. Surrounded by 3 concentric salt circles, a chalk-drawn spiral, and 2 extremely sarcastic owls. That, she says, gesturing to one of the owls, was supposed to be a shadow enhancement charm. The owl hoots, somehow managing to roll its eyes. Let's rewind. Hecate, emboldened by recent lighting triumphs and Artemis' parade proposal, decided to experiment with intensifying shadows without adding more flame. It's about contour, she explained, atmosphere, depth. I want the shadows to feel like they're whispering stories. You nodded, as one does when your host is a goddess who casually handles cursed copper. She spent the morning grinding herbs, melting wax, and whispering to small stones. Then came the complicated bit, combining all those elements into a subtle enchantment woven directly into the torchlight. You were there to stabilize the air, which involved holding a leaf in your mouth and humming a very old lullaby about bees. You're still unsure if you helped or if Hecate was just amusing herself. Anyway, the charm almost worked. The torches flickered, and the shadows deepened, rich, layered, cinematic. The whole cave took on that perfect dusk in an old library vibe. And then, the owls arrived. 2 of them, in a puff of smoke and slightly smug disapproval. One is snow white, one is brown with flecks of gold. Both now perch on the central brazier, heckling Hecate's technique. I didn't summon them, she insists. They just appeared, like critics. The white owl lets out a low tisk. The brown one hoots the melody of an ancient funeral dirge. You try to offer one a piece of dried fig. It pecks at your sleeve with the delicate precision of a seasoned food snob. I think, Hecate says, arms crossed, that the charm acted as a beacon. Not for shadows, but for creatures who live in them. Historians still debate whether Hecate ever kept familiars. Some cultic depictions show her with serpents. Others with dogs, or polecats, don't ask. There's little evidence for owls, but then again, owls are experts at avoiding detection, especially when they disapprove of your vibe. Sir B, notably, wants nothing to do with them. He's hiding behind a mossy boulder, making quiet, nope, noises. You and Hecate spend the next hour trying to figure out what went wrong. She draws diagrams in the ash with a charred stick. You hold up crystals and reflective plates. The owls critique everything. At one point, the white one flaps to a high shelf, knocks over a jar of scented wax, and stares at it like it's making a point. That's it, Hecate mutters. They want something. The brown owl hoots once. Hecate sighs. Of course they want a stage. So now you're helping assemble a makeshift owl amphitheater. Basically a ring of reflective stones lit from below with flickering lanterns that cast perfectly tuned theatrical shadows. The owls take their places. And perform. It's not a dance. Exactly. It's more like shadow calligraphy. Their wings cast shapes across the walls, spirals, trees, faces, ancient symbols that twist and shimmer in response to the torchlight. You can't look away. It's elegant, surreal, hypnotic. At one point, the shadows form an old man kneeling beside a well. He reaches in, pulls out a flame, holds it like a baby bird. Then, slowly, he vanishes. The cave is silent. You realize you've been holding your breath. Even Hecate is speechless. Here's a fringe tidbit. In certain obscure Orphic texts, there's mention of noctilucent messengers, creatures who carry memories through light. Some believe these were metaphors for stars. Others think they were owls. Eventually, The performance ends. The white owl flaps down to the central torch and lets out one final note, clear, soft, and impossibly old. Then, both owls vanish in a shimmer of motes. Like they were never there at all. The cave dims. The shadows return to normal. The lanterns hum contentedly. Hecate exhales. Okay, that was not what I expected. You sit on the floor, overwhelmed and slightly weepy. One of the reflective stones still glows faintly, as if remembering the show. Well, she adds, remind me to never underestimate sarcastic owls again. Sir B crawls out from behind the boulder and begins licking one of the stage stones. You both sit quietly for a while, absorbing whatever just happened. Then Hecate claps her hands. Let's reset, rebuild the shadow circuit, but no more birds. We're going back to controlled flame and geometrically safe gloom. You nod. You need a break from interpretive owl theater. But even as you help redraw the salt circles and polish the lantern glass, you know something's shifted. You've seen what happens when light becomes language. When shadows tell stories too deep for speech. And the next time a torch flickers just right, you swear you can hear the wings again. You're sitting cross-legged in a field of damp grass, squinting at a fire spell that refuses to cooperate. When Hecate announces, we've been copied, you blink. By who? She holds up a rolled scroll, still faintly smoking from the messenger imp that dropped it off. It's festooned with olive wreath stamps and written in that frustratingly self-important cursive that only small-town festival organizers and minor demigods use. The scroll is an invitation, or rather, a flyer, an advertisement. Come one, come all, to the Lantern Harvest. A local village near Delphi is hosting a festival with glowing gourds, magical torches, and a parade of light down the main street. Sound familiar? Hecate deadpans. It does. I invented the glowing gourd. She mutters. Technically, she never copyrighted it, but still. Apparently, a group of villagers stumbled upon one of her old rituals, one that involved torches, singing, and walking backward in a circle, and decided it would make a great festival activity. Now they're promoting it as a folk tradition, and selling fried honey cakes shaped like lanterns. You half expect Hecate to incinerate the scroll in a burst of divine rage. Instead, she sighs. They didn't even get the lighting right. She says, look at this illustration. That torch is orange. It's supposed to be amber with hints of regret. She begins pacing, muttering about light dilution and cultural theft. Sir B trots after her, ears back, unsure if it's time for barking or snacks. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek festivals borrowed from witchcraft traditions or if it was the other way around. The truth is blurrier. In a world where gods walked among mortals, inspiration flowed both ways, and Hecate, for all her power, never filed for intellectual property. You suggest, gently, that maybe imitation is flattery. She looks at you like you just praised lukewarm wine. But the more she thinks about it, the more her expression shifts, from irritation, to calculation, to something perilously close to acceptance. I suppose, she says slowly, it's not wrong. A torch parade is useful, communal, symbolic, dramatic. She perks up. What if we went? You almost choke on your tea. You mean, attend? No, she says. Dominate. And so you find yourself 2 days later walking into a village disguised as festival guests from the hill. Hecate wears a deep hood and carries a staff that glows faintly unless you look directly at it, in which case it flickers and blushes. You carry a basket of sample torches, none of which would pass a basic fire safety inspection. The festival is in full swing. Children run past you wearing paper crowns shaped like flames. Elderly women hand out lanterns carved from squash. Someone's trying to roast chickpeas over a fairy light-strung fence. It's adorable, and deeply chaotic. Then you see it, the parade line. Dozens of villagers, each carrying a homemade torch, some made of wax, some of cloth soaked in oil. One just a bundle of glowworms tied together with optimism. They march slowly down the street, singing an off-key hymn to the Lady of Midnight Flame. Hecate's nose wrinkles. I never used that title. You grin. It's catchy. She doesn't laugh, but she doesn't leave either. Instead, she steps quietly into the parade line. You follow, slightly behind, adjusting your hood. The villagers don't notice at first. Then, slowly, the light from her staff begins to spread. One by one, The torches near her change hue, shifting from flat yellow to layered gold. From clumsy red to rich rose violet. Shadows become deeper, more delicate. Faces look momentarily more honest. People pause, confused, then enchanted. A child gasps, "Mama!" The light's singing. And it is, not loudly, not in notes, but in something that vibrates just beneath thought, a hum that aligns your footsteps with memory. Someone asks, "Who brought the pretty one?" Someone else whispers, "She must be from the original village." Soon, everyone near Hecate has adjusted their pace. The parade becomes a procession. Less clunky, more reverent. The glow spreads, slow but certain. At the center of town, a fire pit awaits. It's meant to be the end point, where torches are dropped into the flames and the spirit of the season is honored with snacks and vague incantations. Hecate stands at the edge of the circle, raises her hand, and the flames bow. Not literally, but close. The fire dims slightly, as if waiting, listening. She steps forward and, without speaking, adds her torch to the pile. It flares, brilliant and silent, and every flame in the town echoes it. For a moment, the entire village is lit not by fire, but by presence, by intent, by the careful, curated mood of a goddess who once fine-tuned torchlight so it could whisper. Then it's over. The fire returns to normal. Children resume yelling. Someone drops a roasted fig. Hecate steps back, adjusts her hood, and leaves without fanfare. On the way out of town, someone taps your shoulder. A teenager, big eyes, nervous hands. "Hi," they say. "Can I ask, where did you learn that kind of light?" You glance at Hecate. She pretends not to listen. You smile. From someone who sees shadows as invitations. The teen nods solemnly, writes it down, and runs off. Later, back in the cave, Hecate mutters while unpacking. "They'll ruin it," she says. You shrug. "Maybe. Or maybe, they'll remember it just enough to try again." She doesn't respond. But that night, she crafts a new torch. And carves a tiny inscription on the handle. For festivals, do not overdo the green. The next night begins with wine. You return from the edge of the cave to find Dionysus himself leaning against Hecate's best cauldron. Sipping something too sparkly to be natural and wearing a laurel wreath made of, yes, tiny glowing grapes. "Evening, darling," he says, swirling the drink. "I heard you've been meddling with ambience." You sigh. "How did you even find us?" He shrugs. "A little bird told me." Then it turned into a cloud of perfume and laughed in iambic pentameter. You know how it is. Hecate emerges from the side chamber. Already frowning. "Not now, Dion. Always now," he says, grinning. "I brought wine. And opinions." He gestures grandly at the cave. "Love the bones. Adore the ceiling texture, but the lighting is, shall we say, emotionally devastating? You've made despair with a hint of longing into a whole aesthetic." "Thank you," Hecate replies flatly. It wasn't a compliment. Sir B snarls faintly. Dionysus ignores him. Instead, the god of revelry begins wandering through the cave, poking the torches, sniffing herbs, snapping his fingers to create small bursts of glittery flame that smell like burnt figs and crushed velvet. Hecate glares. "Don't touch the mood skull." "Oh please," he scoffs. "I invented mood." He pauses beside the conch lantern, lifts it gently, and tilts it back and forth like he's checking its vintage. "This is actually quite nice," he admits. Soft, gentle melancholy, like the feeling you get after finishing a love letter you never send. You and Hecate both blink. "That's exactly what it's for," she says, surprised. "I know," he says smugly. "That's why I showed up. You're not just doing light. You're crafting feeling. And I, dear witch, am an expert in atmospheric excess." Here's a mainstream fact. Dionysian rituals were all about immersion. Music, dance, torchlight, altered states of consciousness. To be swept away. To lose control in a controlled environment. You start to understand why he cares so much about the mood. "Show me your layout," he says, already pulling out a scroll. "Let's upgrade your aesthetic from eerie solitude to hauntingly fabulous." Hecate looks like she'd rather chew on a rusty wand. But she begrudgingly complies. Soon, the cave is a flurry of changes. Dionysus proposes grapevine chandeliers that sway gently with the breeze. He summons a chorus of invisible lutes to hum at frequencies tuned to various emotions. Forgiveness, nostalgia, Slightly confusing crushes. You're assigned the role of emotional lighting test subject. Again. First up, Dionysus, passion torch. It burns burgundy, throws wild looping shadows, and smells vaguely like the inside of an ancient theater wardrobe. You feel overwhelmed, like you should either write a sonnet or break into interpretive dance. No, Hecate says, extinguishing it, too flammable. Also, no dancing. Next, the melancholy bubble. A floating orb that glows seafoam green and radiates the distinct sensation of a bittersweet farewell at a train station. That one, she admits, has potential. Then there's the forget-me glow, which makes everyone in the room briefly forget what they were doing, including Dionysus, who ends up trying to charm a broom for 10 minutes before realizing it's not a nymph. Historians still argue whether Dionysian and chthonic rituals ever intersected meaningfully. Most agree the two cults were quite different. Hecate's rites were precise, lunar, shadowed. Dionysus favored noise, passion, chaos. But tonight, you see what happens when the two philosophies collide. They argue constantly. This corner needs more depth. Dionysus insists it's a sacred shadow threshold. Hecate retorts it's supposed to evoke dread. Dread can be sexy. No. At one point, he tries to install a mirrored disco orb made of polished beetle shells. Hecate hexes it into a cockroach and hurls it into the fire. Eventually, they reach a compromise. Hecate agrees to test a vine-wrapped archway lit with floating teal lights. If Dionysus will stop calling her spooky spice, he relents, barely. They craft a new mood scene together. A cave corner meant to evoke deep memory. It uses 4 overlapping torch types, a reflective water basin, and a scent infusion of myrrh, cinnamon, and thunderstorm. You step inside, and you remember something. Not a memory exactly, more like the shape of one. You feel 6 years old, holding someone's hand in a garden. You don't know whose. You don't want to leave. You don't even know where you are. It passes. You come out blinking, changed. Hecate notices. So does Dionysus. You felt it, she says. Dionysus nods. That's the good stuff. Here's a quirky detail. The ancient Greeks didn't just see light as illumination. They believed certain lights could carry meaning. That divine presence could glow. That flickering meant someone was listening. Later, Dionysus opens another bottle of wine, offers a toast to shadow sorcery and aesthetic synergy, and disappears in a poof of perfumed fog, leaving only faint laughter and a trail of crushed grape leaves behind. Hecate sits on a boulder, sighing. That man is exhausting. You smile, but he's not wrong. She shrugs. He's not right, either. Still, she doesn't put the teal torches away. That night, you fall asleep beneath the vine-lit archway, dreaming of colors that don't exist and memories that never quite happened. And just before the dreams take hold completely, you think you hear Hecate whisper, very softly, hauntingly fabulous, my foot. The cave smells like dog hair and burnt incense, which can only mean one thing. Someone's been experimenting with spellcraft and snacks at the same time. You step in carefully. Hecate is crouched near the ceremonial fire pit, surrounded by half-melted candles, 3 overturned incense bowls, and one extremely guilty-looking Serbi. Don't say anything, she mutters, waving smoke away with a branch that may have once been part of a broom. You don't, but you do notice the charred remains of a sacred myrrh cone smoldering sadly under a pile of dog drool. Apparently, the night started with a simple idea: infuse incense into the lighting ritual to enhance emotional resonance. The theory? Different scents could layer intention onto torchlight. Jasmine for clarity, frankincense for courage, myrrh for spiritual grounding, and possibly, if all else failed, lemon balm for keeping Serbi from chewing the firewood. But like most of Hecate's simple ideas, this one spiraled. First, the incense made the torches flare brighter than expected. Then the smoke thickened and curled along the ground like it had plans. Then the ghost dog started chasing his tail in high-speed loops, and a chorus of whispers echoed through the cave, none of which were saying anything helpful. You arrived just in time to see Serbi knock over the ritual tripod in a panic, sending one bowl of enchanted resin into the fire, another into a torch stand, and the third, containing the last of the powdered moon mint, directly onto the sacred rug. It's not technically a disaster. But it's definitely a mess. Hecate throws a small enchanted rock into the fire. It hisses, fizzles, then emits a single puff of green smoke that smells like charred toast and mild disappointment. I was this close, she says, holding her fingers half a barley grain apart. To what, you ask? Layered flame-scent emotion fields. She replies. Imagine. Light that glows with a specific emotional tone. Guided by scent, walk through it and feel calm. Or brave. Or slightly defiant. Or confused and sneezy. You suggest. She glares at you. Yes. Well, that's why we test. Historians still debate how incense was used in ancient magical rites. Some suggest it was meant to please the gods. Others that it masked the scent of more pungent rituals. But in Hecate's hands, scent isn't just background, it's spell architecture. Invisible scaffolding that carries feeling like smoke carries prayer. You offer to help clean up. She grumbles but hands you a charred feather duster and a cloth that wrings itself out if you whisper compliments to it. You do your best. Meanwhile, the ghost dog quietly rearranges the bowls into a triangle and lies down in the middle like he's ready for a seance. Sir B slinks under Hecate's work table and begins gnawing on a stick labeled, "Do not chew." After an hour, the cave is mostly cleared. The incense experiment has been shelved, temporarily, but not forgotten. Then, with the kind of sudden, possibly unwise inspiration only witches and late-night snackers possess, Hecate stands up and declares, "We're taking it outside." 10 minutes later, you're in a small glade behind the cave. The stars blinking overhead like they're watching this purely for entertainment. Hecate sets up a circle of stones, places torches in a spiral, and brings out a small incense brazier made from a repurposed tortoise shell. You light the torches one by one. With each flame, she adds a pinch of something: rosemary for memory, lavender for softness, wormwood for edge. The firelight bends and bows, colors shifting from golden to seafoam to violet gray. Then comes the final ingredient, a tiny, powder dry sliver of petrified cedar, gifted by an underworld spirit during one of Hecate's less relaxing journeys. She drops it into the fire. The torch nearest you flares, and suddenly, the entire glade feels reverent. Not heavy, not loud, but alert, like the space itself is paying attention. You stand very still. Even Sir B hushes. For a moment, no one moves. Then, gently, the light shifts again, this time to something warmer, softer. The scent in the air now is familiar. Something like baking bread and old pages and the hug of someone you miss. The glade exhales. Hecate smiles. That's it. Here's a quirky fact. In certain rural festivals, villagers would light blessing fires at crossroads using a mix of herbs, bone, and wine, claiming the smoke could carry wishes straight to the gods. Most modern historians dismiss it. But those villagers believed something sacred was woven into the smoke. So does Hecate. The glade becomes a sacred space, not because someone declared it, but because the firelight has asked it to be. You sit in the grass, watching the shadows ripple like reflections of feelings too big to speak. Hecate lowers herself onto a stone and adds a few final herbs to the brazier. Next time, she says, no animals in the ritual zone. Sir B whines. Especially you. You lie back, the grass cool against your neck. The torches flicker. The scent wraps around you like a blanket. And for just a little while, the night feels designed, not random, not scary, just lit with intention. By now, you've accepted that the cave has a revolving door for gods and weirdos. So when Persephone shows up, it doesn't even surprise you. She just appears. One moment there's nothing, and the next there's the faint scent of pomegranate, a gust of cool underworld air, and a woman in a midnight red cloak, holding a satchel made of woven shadow and flower stems. Knock knock, she says, with a smile that somehow makes you both want to hug her and kneel. I brought gifts. Hecate doesn't get up, but her eyes soften. Still playing courier for the underworld? Only for you. They hug. It's brief, but real. Sir B wags his tail. Ghost dog howls once, then drifts toward the back of the cave, where the light is deepest. You clear your throat awkwardly. Persephone notices you and grins. You must be the assistant. Has she taught you the "don't ignite the basil" rule yet? She didn't mention that, you say, concerned. Good luck. Persephone unpacks the satchel. Inside, a handful of obsidian flakes. A pouch of glowing fungus from Tartarus, safe. Probably. And a tiny lantern made of bone-white marble. She sets it down carefully. Like it's breakable, emotionally. If not physically. I thought you might want to see what the other side of ambient light looks like. She says. Hecate studies the lantern. Let me guess. Underworld glow? Version 7.2. Persephone says. Beaming. Less scream. More shimmer. She lights it with a whisper. The flame is silver white with no flicker. It doesn't cast shadows, it drinks them. The cave dims around it. Not darker exactly. Just quieter. More still. You lean closer. The light feels like memory. But not your own. Ancient. Heavy. Kind. Persephone watches you carefully. It's made to illuminate absence. She says. The thing's not here anymore. The people you miss. The rooms that don't exist. You stare at it, unable to speak. Yeah, she says gently. That's the usual reaction. Historians still debate what Persephone's role really was. Was she a prisoner? A queen? A symbol of cycles? Or all three at once? Her cults were secretive. Her rituals whispered. But many agree that she presided over emotional depth. And depth, it turns out, glows very softly. Hecate touches the lantern with one long finger. It's lovely. Persephone shrugs. Had some help. Orpheus sang to the crystal until it stopped humming in minor key. And Hypnos donated the candle wax. He says it's harvested from dreams. You blink. That's possible? Only if you don't ask too many questions. They spend the afternoon swapping gifts. Hecate gives Persephone a torch that flickers to match heartbeat rhythms. Persephone returns with an incense that smells like moss and old lullabies. At some point, you end up making tea. Because no one else will. And you realize something. The two of them are friends. Not in the shallow, we meet at temple mixers way. In the real, shared experience, I trust you with my worst days kind of way. They talk about old rituals. Failed spells. That time Hades tried to design mood lighting and nearly flooded a crypt with stardust. They laugh. They relax. Even the cave seems to enjoy it. The lights dim naturally. Shadows stretch out lazily like cats. The ghost dog curls into a ball and vibrates with ghost purring. Persephone eventually walks you through how the lantern works. It's not about the flame, she says. It's about the silence it creates. The kind that makes you notice your feelings. Not run from them. She places the lantern beside your bedroll before she leaves. You might need it, she says. Then she hugs Hecate again. And vanishes. No portal. No sparkle. Just gone. You lie in the dark. The underworld lantern glowing beside you. It doesn't light the room. It lights the space between things. And somehow, that's enough. You're halfway through organizing Hecate's ever-growing collection of enchanted tea light holders when you hear a knock on the cave wall. Not a polite tap-tap, but a thudding thunk like someone headbutted the stone while trying to make an entrance. You round the corner, and there they are. 3 young witches, barely out of adolescence, with oversized cloaks, overstuffed satchels, and eyes full of awe. We heard you do lighting. One of them blurts, like, emotional lighting? Hecate peers at them, eyebrow arched, cup of root tea halfway to her lips. I don't teach, she says. We brought snacks, the second girl offers, holding up a bundle of dried apple slices and something wrapped in betel leaf. I definitely don't teach for snacks. The third one, clearly the spokesperson, steps forward. But you're the one who made the flame that remembered. You invented ritual shadow mapping. You crafted grief glow. You made the fig torch. Hecate freezes. That was a prototype. They said it made someone cry and forgive their dad. The girl says reverently. Sir B barks once, possibly in approval, or maybe because someone stepped on his tail. And just like that, the cave has interns. You try to look supportive. Hecate tries to look annoyed. Neither of you quite succeeds. The young witches, who refer to themselves collectively as the Wicks, for reasons no one bothers to ask, immediately begin poking through Hecate's lighting artifacts. One finds the shadow bowl from weeks ago and stares into it like it's giving dating advice. Another nearly drinks a bottle of sleep light essence. The third gets stuck inside the mood skull's reflective beam and spends 10 minutes convinced she's a teacup. They mean well. You offer gently. I am going to hex their boots together. Hecate mutters. But she doesn't. Instead, she assigns them simple tasks. Polishing lenses. Sorting reflective stones by tone and density. holding crystals up to flames and documenting what feelings arise. Using a rating system that includes entries like, mild longing, regret with a side of inspiration, and, this torch made me want to reread old scrolls and cry. The wicks are enthusiastic, chaotic, but not without talent. One of them, Airy, the quiet one, redesigns a torch stand so it diffuses shadow into delicate loops. Another, Tala, accidentally invents a floating scent orb that follows you around until you feel acknowledged. The third, Bryn, summons a flame that flickers in sync with the cave's ambient humming. Hecate is furious, which is to say, she nods once and says, "That'll do." Here's a mainstream historical fact. While most Greek witches didn't have formal apprenticeships, some regions, especially Thessaly, had informal circles of learners who passed knowledge through demonstration, observation, and very cryptic notes. No exams, just vibes. This is basically that. You help Airy test her new whisper wick, a thread of flame that pulses gently whenever you lie to yourself. It's subtle, comforting, unsettling. Hecate tries to stay aloof, but soon she's muttering advice, handing out scraps of underworld parchment, and explaining flame theory using piles of salt and reflective beetle carapaces. You don't add feeling to light, she tells them. You reveal the feeling that's already there. Bryn nods, writing it down like it's gospel. It probably will be by next week. There's a fringe theory among modern scholars that Hecate once led a short-lived school of light in a hidden cave in central Greece. No records survive, just rumors of the witch's halo and a forest where trees glow when you tell the truth under moonlight. Watching now, you wonder if it's true, or if maybe this is how that legend begins. That night, the wicks ask if they can stay a little longer, just until the next moon. Hecate grumbles, but she adds 3 extra bedrolls near the fire and lights a new torch that smells faintly of nutmeg and cautious optimism. You lie beside the underworld lantern. The wicks are already asleep, muttering dream snippets about flame hues and emotional clarity. And Hecate? She sits by the fire, polishing a new crystal, whispering softly. You give one demonstration, she murmurs, and suddenly everyone thinks you're a curriculum. But her smile says otherwise. You wake up to chaos. Not the screaming, burning kind. The rituals have gone slightly too viral kind. The kind where a formerly quiet oracle down the hill has declared that the world is out of balance, and it's definitely your boss's fault. The wicks are already arguing. They said the shadows are too clever. Airy whispers. They said the torches spoke to them. Bryn adds, eyes wide. I think they're jealous. Tala huffs. That oracle hasn't updated their prophecy model since the Bronze Age. Hecate listens to all this with the calm demeanor of someone who has seen civilizations rise, fall, and get back up again wearing slightly different robes. She sips her root tea. Slowly. Then she sets down her cup. Let's go. You trail behind her and the wicks as they descend to the oracle's domain, a temple carved into a cliffside, overhanging a valley that always smells like mystery and goats. You've never been here before. But the architecture screams, visions available on request. There are polished obsidian slabs, a dramatic mist generator powered by a hidden waterfall, and a priestess in layered linen robes glaring at you like you've walked in holding a lit torch made of crime. I assume you've come to explain yourself, the oracle says, arms crossed. Hecate raises one brow. Explain what, exactly? The dreams, the oracle snaps, the hallucinations, the emotional floods during sleep. People are waking up mid-prophecy with tears and clarity. We haven't had a good, vague omen in weeks. You blink, and this is a problem? Yes, the oracle says. Ambiguity is a tradition. These dreams you've triggered are far too specific. Turns out, the lighting rituals you and Hecate developed, the ones using scent layers, shadow moods, and emotional harmonics, have started leaking. Villagers who saw the Lantern Festival now light their homes with whisper wicks. A shepherd used the soft grief torch during lambing season and ended up reconciling with his estranged brother. A merchant installed a memory mirror and stopped selling fake perfume. The world is, very gently, getting too introspective. Hecate smiles faintly. Perhaps it needed to. The oracle's mouth opens, then closes, then opens again. You've destabilized the vibe economy. Sir B barks helpfully. You all get a private tour of the sacred prognostication chamber, which, it turns out, is just a big round room with acoustically perfect walls and 600 flickering candles meant to confuse the subconscious. Hecate studies them silently, then points to a silver torch sconce mounted near the ceiling. Who enchanted that? The oracle frowns. It's been there for decades. No one remembers. Well, Hecate says, it's amplifying your message field. Every vague metaphor you mutter gets multiplied by 30. That's why people were only hearing riddles. The oracle's jaw drops. She mutters a prayer. Can you fix it? No, Hecate replies, but I can retune it. She climbs the stairs, no ladder, she just walks up the air like it owes her. Mutters a few words, and taps the torch with her ring. Immediately, the room shifts. The candlelight dims, but sharpens. The echo changes pitch. A breeze whispers a memory you hadn't remembered storing. Tala gasps. The walls just apologized to me. The oracle falls to her knees. This is clarity. This is dangerous. Hecate chuckles. No, this is balance. Here's a historical side note. Oracles were often seen as divine channels. But they required a balance of stimuli to induce visions, light, scent, rhythm. Hecate's changes didn't disrupt prophecy. They cleaned the window. You leave the temple as villagers begin trickling in. Some carry lanterns. One hums a tune from the parade. The mood has changed. No more fear, just curiosity. Back in the cave, the wicks are buzzing. Did you see how the torch harmonized with the acoustic loop? I think that oracle might write poetry now. I want to rework the regret lamp to include forgiveness notes. Hecate sits heavily on her stool. They're never going to stop, are they? She asks. You hand her a cup of tea. No, you say. You started a lighting movement. She groans. I was aiming for slightly improved gloom, not a reformation. And yet, she doesn't stop them. Instead, she picks up her toolkit and starts etching a new sigil onto a lantern base. A subtle one, for nuance. As night falls, you walk outside the cave. The valley below is dotted with flickers, soft torchlight, subtle shadow projections, glimmers of learning. And you realize, the light is spreading. Not like wildfire, like truth. One gentle glow at a time. Tonight, the cave is quieter than usual. Not silent, there's still the low hum of distant torchlight. The rhythmic drip of water on stone. The occasional rustle as one of the wicks rolls over in her sleep and mutters something about emotional saturation, but it's the kind of quiet that feels full. Like the hush after a song finishes but before the audience claps. Hecate sits by the central flame, polishing a torch as if it's a memory she doesn't want to forget. You settle beside her. Will you keep going? You ask. She doesn't answer immediately, just holds the flame closer, watching how the light curves across her fingers. You know, she says softly, I started this because I wanted silence that made sense. A way to light a space without waking the grief inside it. She gestures vaguely at the racks of half-finished lanterns and prototype torch racks and scent scrolls. This became something else. Outside, the wind shifts. The torches Hecate set along the outer path respond automatically now. One flickers to soft blue. Another dims to a low rose gold. They're alive. In a way, not sentient, but attuned, thoughtful. The wicks are asleep. Sir B is curled into the shape of a snail beside Bryn's bedroll. The ghost dog is watching the fire with that 1,000-yard stare only the dead can pull off. Persephone's underworld lantern still glows from its nook, pulsing faintly like a heart in repose. You close your eyes for a moment. You remember the first time you saw one of Hecate's torches, too yellow. Not enough moon. The gourd that glowed like a secret. The skull that whispered stories. The accidental owls. Dionysus's vine chandelier. The oracle's reluctant transformation. The festival that borrowed too much and somehow gave back even more. You've walked through light that remembered people. Light that listened. Light that let go. Here's a final historical wrinkle. Some sources say Hecate carried twin torches to guide souls through darkness. Others say they weren't for guidance at all, but to show the dark it was being watched. You like that version better. Hecate leans back against the cave wall, eyes on the ceiling. Maybe it's not about the flame. She murmurs. Maybe it's about the space the flame makes. The permission it gives to feel something real. To notice a shadow. To let go of being scared of the dark. You say nothing. There's nothing to add. After a while, she stands, stretches, and dims the central fire to a soft amber glow. The light doesn't vanish, it settles. Like a breath exhaled fully for the first time. She leaves one torch burning, a violet one with a green ember core. The one she uses when she doesn't want to think too hard but still wants to remember what she's learned. You lie down, the warmth from the underworld lantern at your feet. A whisper wick gently illuminating your thoughts. And slowly, gently, you fall asleep. The shadows don't follow. They rest beside you. And now, with the last torches gently dimmed and the final ritual stilled, the cave quiets completely. The night outside stretches wide and deep. But not empty. The stars blink softly above the valley, scattered across the sky like bits of glowing resin spilled from Hecate's pouch. Each flicker holds a memory. Each space between them, a question not yet asked. You feel the last light settle across your chest. A warmth without weight, a hush without fear, a darkness that isn't cold, but comforting. Listening. Around you, the air slows. Even the fire crackles more gently. Like it's learned your breathing rhythm and doesn't want to wake you. Let your thoughts drift. Let them tangle briefly in old torchlight. Then loosen and float free. Let go of the need to understand everything. Not all light is for seeing. Some is for feeling. And some is just there to keep the dark from getting lonely. Hecate sits nearby. Or maybe she's already walked off into the trees to light a torch for someone else tonight. It doesn't matter. You're safe here. You're welcome here. Let your breath slow. Let your body feel heavy. Like wet earth. Like deep roots. Like silence. Glowing from the inside out. The shadows are soft now. The light is kind. And there is nothing left you need to do. Not tonight. Just rest.